You're listening to a Better Mousetrap podcast, a joint production by Marcos Dinnerstein and Far From TV. Our goal is to bring you, the listener, closer to the technology community here in New York City. As part of our continued lead-up to Blockchain Week here in New York, Better Mousetrap is speaking with David Moore, co-founder of Sludge, an investigative journalism startup focused on money and politics. Sludge has been accepted as one of the first fleet of newsrooms on Civil, a blockchain-based publishing platform for independent journalism. Sludge will focus on the shadowy ways that special interests have captured America's political system, looking beyond traditional lobbying disclosures and campaign contributions to reveal the hidden networks and conflicts of interest that drive systematic corruption.
And I'm Marcos Dinnerstein, your host on a Better Mousetrap podcast. And we're speaking with David Moore, who, with Donnie Shaw, is the co-founder of Sludge, a newsroom on Civil. Sludge will, quote, expose the hidden influence of lobbyists and special interests in the creation of public policy. So, all you're going to do is expose influence and lobbyists. Nice.
Yes.
This is timely and ambitious. So let's dig in. Tell us about your background and your co-founder's background.
Sure. Thank you, Marcos. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to talk about our work. And yeah, one of my jokes as we get ready to launch Sludge publicly has been that we're having trouble identifying any political corruption in the news topics to cover these days. But we're excited and fortunate to be launching a publication at this time that's going to be looking at the swamp of DC and the political lobbying system that enables this all the crazy news that we all experience every day. So. My co-founder Donnie and I were the founders of the website opencongress.org, which from 2007 to 2013 tracked bills and money in the U.S. Congress. And it grew to become the most visited nonprofit site for understanding what was happening in the U.S. Congress. And Donnie wrote a daily blog covering the news, the latest in legislation coming from the Hill. But along the way, we were just continually dismayed, just over and over again, by the degree to which lobbyists for special interests defined what was possible on the Hill. They defined the boundaries of the legislatively possible, and there wasn't much ability to be responsive, to be creative, and to be really publicly accountable. So when the big banks, the big pharma, the defense contractors all had a strong control of the public policymaking process. So we were tracking sort of developments in independent media, and we were really interested in the possibility of blockchain technology to decentralize journalism. And so when Civil, which is the platform that we'll be building on, came to us with an invitation to apply to create Sludge, a money and politics newsroom on Civil, we were really excited, and we thought it was a perfect fit for the kind of independent focus that we seek to bring to the money and politics landscape. So our timeline right now is that here in May, we're building up towards public launch. It'll be happening soon. We don't have a launch date set, but we'll be launching as part of the first fleet of newsrooms on the Civil platform. So there'll be about a dozen of us, dozen different publications that'll be launching first. But then after that, it's really important to state up front that everyone should know that Civil will be open to other applications. So other media projects can and will launch on the Civil publishing platform and take advantage of all of the blockchain technologies and more that they're building in to their system.
Okay, so what problem does being decentralized solve that suggests that you be on Civil's platform?
Sure.
Why can't you just have well encrypted servers and operate as those do?
Great. So the primary ability that publishing on Civil gives us is the independence to create our own business, and then to and we're structured as a for-profit business because we think that's the best way to maintain our independence. Our previous projects were nonprofit projects, and so for this project, for this journalism project, we're focused to be a media company, and so along this way then. We're looking to build a membership base that will provide our primary revenue stream. And so members who will support Sludge and support our mission of investigative journalism will help to form our community in the sense of being able to contribute tips and story ideas to be able to ask questions and interact with our reporters and editors, and to help us guide our coverage of what they want to see covered in this 2018 midterms election year. So we're going to be primarily accountable to our paying members who will pay Sludge to support our investigative and independent journalism. And so then along the way, this will help us be accountable primarily to them and not to advertisers or not to a board of directors, sort of typically, or not to executives at a larger media company. This gives us the ability to chart our own path. And the blockchain technology that Civil is developing comes with several other features for accountability. So what the Civil platform makes possible is to publish an article on a web page, pretty much like a normal blog or news article that you'd see, but then archive it permanently to the Ethereum blockchain. And so what this means is that at the time of that archiving, it will be a permanent copy exists in the Ethereum blockchain for anyone to be able to later run a check on and run an algorithm and then confirm that the text of that article is the same as it was when it was published online. So this creates the strongest possible degree of accountability in our reporting, that readers come to Sludge knowing that when we publish, we stand by the version of the story that's published at that time. And so this means that it's difficult for our coverage to be influenced in ways, because you can always run a check to see how we cover issues like net neutrality, or how we cover issues like the fossil fuel industry, or how we cover issues like the defense contracting systems and more. We're going to be anyone will be able to do like a diff, so to speak, to use a little bit of a technical term, on the articles. And we will then be publishing corrections that will point updates and corrections to our articles, as any journalistic outlet will, that will point back to the original articles. But being on the blockchain allows us to have the strongest degree of permanence for our publishing, and is an indication for our community that we're committed to being really radically transparent in our publishing process.
And let me just jump in to clarify the term diff is, of course, the difference or the differential between one version and another, right?
Yep, that's right. And there's going to be, so that means that unlike other media sites or publications where it's possible for the coverage to be shaded in subtle ways, instead, when we publish to the Ethereum blockchain, you'll be able to always see that text as it exists, and then we stand by that. The versions of our previous stories will always be accessible to be able to compare the tone and facts of our coverage. And I'm excited to see what kind of new tools are developed by independent and outside of Civil developers to be able to present views on that to make that process more accessible. Because after all, one question I get a lot is that, does that mean we have to read this on the blockchain somehow? And I always seek to make clear that no, we're archiving to the blockchain. You will read a Sludge article and on a regular web page and sign up to support us this year. Our members will initially sign up to support us with U.S. dollars, with fiat currency, and paid for with like you'd support another independent or startup project. But there's another exciting element to what we're building, and that's the Civil tokens. And the Civil tokens are a utility token that will enable people to participate in the Civil community. It's almost like a protocol. And so now, Marcos, if now's a good time, I can sort of talk a little bit more about how the token works for the community governance.
Sure, that would be great. And if, as part of that explanation, if you could clarify how it's a utility token and whether the SEC would have any interest in it as a potential security. All of that stuff would be great. So, yes?
Sure.
Tell us about it.
Great. So here's the state of play. Civil, the company, is issuing a new token that will be called Civil, CVL. It will be compliant with Ethereum, so it's an ERC20 token. And it's not yet launched, but it's you can read more about where the things stand with its release schedule on the Civil website. And so, yes, the SEC is looking at lots of cryptocurrency issues. And the term utility token is indicating that it's the civil token seeks to be used to support the production of independent journalism. And so it'll be used to support independent newsrooms in their operations and for community newsrooms doing local coverage of the kind that is no longer as robustly supported by the local advertising revenue. After all, a big part that I haven't emphasized yet in our discussion is that we're looking to address the problem that the previous revenues for news and journalism support aren't viable anymore in the contemporary economy here in May 2018. So what we're looking to do is to be able to support newsmakers to do local reporting of the kind that communities want, but that there's not ad revenue for anymore. So the civil token forthcoming will be used by independent newsrooms to be able to support their operations. There's a crucial part of this, which is that it's used in a governance process. So as the Civil blog has articulated recently, the Civil platform itself will have like a whitelist, so to speak. And then the whitelist is of publications that are on the platform and that have the access to publish to the blockchain from the Civil platform. And publications on Civil must agree to abide by a constitution that's forthcoming, and then also agree to abide by journalistic standards. And so a challenge can be raised to an individual publisher on the Civil network. And then there's a formal process by which the challengers put up some stakes in the form of Civil tokens. And then there's an open window, and this is called the token curated registry process. And so your listeners can dig into the term token curated registry. There's an open process, or there's a structured process that takes place over time by which the community then is able to vote on whether or not publication A is able to remain on the Civil platform or is voted off in a sense. And then there's a process for allocating the tokens that come out of that challenge. But the Civil tokens then act as proxies for votes in the governance process. So this means that when you're coming to a Sludge article, you're getting news about, say the Texas Senate race, right? A major race with campaign contributions. But you know that underneath it, that we're accountable to a civil community for our journalistic standards. And so we hope that in our coverage of special interests and lobbying, the New York State governor's race, which I'm very interested in expanding our coverage of, and all of the lobbying that and dark money that we're going to be diving into, you know that underneath it, we're accountable to the civil community that can that's going to be continually voting on different newsrooms who are applying to join or who aren't living up to journalistic standards. And so in this way, we seek to support quality journalism and keep the edges of the civil community really accountable to journalistic standards. It's looking to support experienced and quality journalists in producing work that's supported by a community that will pay for it.
Don't go away. When we come back, we'll continue our civil discussion with David Moore, co-founder of Sludge, a newsroom covering money in politics.
One thing that we might not be prepared for in the future is looking at climate refugees. So I think this is the beginning of that discussion. We're happy to have the CEO for the U.S. Fund of UNICEF participate on it. The Chief of Immigrant Affairs from the City of Los Angeles, and moderated by the fantastic Alice Charles, who is the Urban Development Lead of the World Economic Forum. And she's on our advisory board, and she's been really fantastic, and she'll be organizing that panel. We're looking at it in the lens of refugees. What do refugees mean for cities? With everything going on in Syria and around the world. Last year, we had people from over 300 cities and 30 countries, and we're expecting even more this year. So feel free to reach out to us, and we'd love to welcome you to New York this May.
You've been listening to Simon Sylvester Chowdhury, Executive Director and co-founder of CivLab and co-founder of Smart Cities New York, North America's leading global conference exploring the emerging influence of cities in shaping the future this May 8th to 11th here in New York City. Get more information at Smart Cities NY. That's SmartCitiesNY.com. For more interviews like this one, follow A Better Mousetrap podcast on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, and don't forget to sign up for the newsletter today.
Looking to create high-quality videos? Find the right talent and crews in New York City and around the world on Story Hunter. Go to storyhunter.com. We're back on a Better Mousetrap podcast. I'm Marcos Dinnerstein, speaking with David Moore, co-founder of the Money and Politics newsroom, Sludge. What would happen if a large group of people, stakeholders of civil, decided that they didn't like your coverage because it didn't favor their position? Let's say it were extreme right wing, and they decided to call you out and say it's not appropriate and you should be kicked off. Is there a mechanism that prevents the tyranny of the majority?
Yes, there's a great question, and that's a great question. And yes, there's a mechanism. It's going to be called the Civil Journalism Advisory Council, and their function in the governance process is to be able to oversee the community voting process. And in the unlikely but possible edge cases where a vote by the community goes against what they view as the commitment to the civil constitution's values of basically responsible acting and community best practices, the Journalism Advisory Council will have the ability to alter decisions for the entire community. But that process is sought to be rare, and that's sought to be just as a backstop to the basic operations of the first having a token community vote. So in response to your good question, one answer is that it would be difficult and very expensive for any one actor to acquire a controlling voting interest in the civil token in the token curated registry. And so there is it's a wide and diverse enough participant pool that the votes ought to be are designed to be reflecting a real mass audience and consumer base of civil token holders, which could include local newsrooms or policy newsrooms and supporters of independent journalism and more.
Okay, if my last name were, say, for example, Coke,
yes,
there would still be a mechanism to counter that massive money.
Great. So again, great question. It's sometimes what civil is seeking to do is sometimes been referred to as billionaire proofing independent and quality journalism, because we've seen in recent years examples of powerful specialized interests being able to affect news publishing in a few different ways, whether it's taking down a site and buying its database of news articles, or simply retaliating against a new union at a newsroom. And we can go into some of the specifics of these cases in New York, LA, Chicago, and more major cities. But for any given billionaire, it would be a very difficult and also transparent process for them to acquire anything like a very controlling interest on civil tokens. And then there would be the Journalism Advisory Council acts as the backstop to be able to overturn, in rare instances, the community decision that doesn't comply with the civil constitution. And the civil constitution is coming soon. And for anyone reading along, can find much more about this at joincivil.com, where their blog does a terrific job of articulating the vision for how the community is going to work, and to lay out the process of the token curated registry, and to lay out the process by which new publishers can apply to have a blog on civil. So I encourage listeners this is something that they can be a part of, to have their own newsroom. Down the line, the software is going to be open source. So they'll be able to have their own customized blog with their customized design, hosted on your own URL at your own web server, but publishing to the Ethereum blockchain if you're continue to be part of the civil community. And so in this way, we hope that local news and policy journalism is really supported on the civil platform, and it gets greater reach and builds. The crucial part is building the membership that's going to be the primary revenue for many of these new publications. There's one other really cool angle that I'd like to highlight now, if I can,
Yes,
and that's
please.
about it's about smart contracts. So what the Ethereum blockchain technology makes possible is smart contracts where two parties to a contract, so just to be simple, right, to be simplistic about it, two parties of a contract define the terms and sign the contracts, and upon each side acknowledging it's completed, the transaction occurs and so that's what's often referred to as it's trustless in the sense of that it doesn't need to be a trustless authority. It's automatically, the contract, once both parties agree to it, is enacted. And so this is both really efficient from a financial and economic perspective because the transfer is direct. There's not a middle person or a middle entity taking a large cut for things like marketing budgets. And it's transparent for the community to be able to see what happened, that this contract was enacted between these two signers of the contract. And so in more practical terms for us as political folks and consumers of news and just being extremely online people, what this means is that journalists will be able to put out bids for reporting projects or bid themselves on reporting projects. So Sludge as a newsroom will be able to say, we're interested in covering dark money in this state election. We're seeking this target. And a community that's interested in seeing that report will be able to, with civil tokens, be able to sign the contract for that report to be produced. And upon its delivery, the civil tokens would transfer to Sludge, and we would use them to pay our reporters. So there's a lot of creativity and innovation that's going to be possible through smart contracts using the civil blockchain technology. And again, the reason it's efficient is because there's less of a line item for expensive marketing, for lots of managers. The goal is for local journalists to be able to have a revenue stream for the kind of reporting that there's a real demand for, but that's currently not supported by ad models or by centralized media companies that seek scale and clicks above the production of local quality journalism.
Nice. So in this particular case, which is a very central to your mission, use case, the condition that would be met that would execute the contract would be the publication of the story that has, in a sense, been commissioned by users. Is that correct?
That's one possibility. So now that's just something that's unlocked by the blockchain technology underlying Civil's platform. So I think there'll be increasing amounts of that. Think of it almost as Kickstarter for local journalism. This won't be the only way that people get paid to produce journalism on Civil, but I think it's a really powerful way to think about what's unlocked and made possible with the blockchain technology. Because right now, journalists can do this through crowdfunding campaigns, but there's a couple of bottlenecks. You have to promote it. There's a chance that there's a chance that the pitch doesn't go as widely as it could. It's not as found by as many people as possible. What Civil will be doing as it launches and rolls out this year, here in the first half of 2018, is to be able to provide people with the ability to find and support these projects, and then the Civil tokens will go directly to the producers of the work in most cases, right, in a typical case. And so this should free up, so some of your listeners probably might have an idea for a reporting project that they'd like to do or a reporting project that they'd like to support. And that direct connection is made possible through the decentralization of the blockchain. And they don't need to go through Civil to enact the contract. They can find it through Civil. Like through the Civil website, you can search for, dark money in the name of your state and see who's got proposals and expertise and what newsroom projects to support if you want to. But you don't need to get it approved. And it's not like managers have to say that, we're going to do this difficult report instead of producing more celebrity news. Instead, all the incentives now are beginning to align. And what's revolutionary about the Civil platform and why we're so excited to be part of these awesome newsrooms that are part of the First Fleet is because it gets reporters the independence and the focus to be able to do the kind of quality, impactful journalism that they've wanted to do, and that they haven't had necessarily had the agency and the freedom from their editors and the business department to be able to do.
Stay right where you are. We'll re-immerse in the Sludge story after this.
Want to be featured in the first edition of Startup Guide New York? Nominations are now open. Go to nyc.startupguide.world/let's do this. Our city has played Upstart Accelerator to the likes of Alexander Hamilton, Eleanor Roosevelt, Billie Holiday, Jonas Salk, and Biggie Smalls. Packed with city essentials, inspiring startup stories, and expert insights, Startup Guide New York puts the spotlight on the best and the brightest from the New York startup scene. Entrepreneurs, investors, colleges, accelerators, co-working spaces, and the experts can now be nominated to be featured in Startup Guide New York, the first ever entrepreneurial handbook dedicated to the city's vibrant startup scene. Nominations are now open until May 14th. Go to nyc.startupguide.world/let's do this.
Looking to create high-quality videos? Find the right talent and crews in New York City and around the world on Story Hunter. Go to storyhunter.com. We are back. I'm Marcos Dinnerstein. This is a Better Mousetrap podcast. And today we're with David Moore, co-founder of Sludge, a newsroom on civil. Sludge will focus on money in politics. So, with two revenue sources, subscription and civil tokens, would you, as the founders and I imagine managing editors, determine a subset of stories that you want to be producing based on the subscription revenue, and then in conjunction with readers, would you then entertain producing other stories?
That's right.
That bubble up from public sentiment.
Yep. So we're launching Sludge with a definite editorial focus: money in politics broadly, lobbying, dark money, and special interest campaign contributions. And so we'll be covering the 2018 elections and then also the deeper network of how the system works in DC lobbying for special interests to advance their agenda without a lot of public scrutiny, or in places where public disclosure doesn't apply. So that's going to be the overwhelming majority of our stories, are focused at stories that we've wanted to cover, or stories that we want to tell on the open web for the public interest, to be able to defend publicly accountable policymaking, and to be able to reduce the interest of money in politics.
And this will be primarily at the federal level?
Yep. So we are going to be, our primary focus is going to be in the U.S. Congress, and then on the midterm elections over this election year. We're also going to be doing state house and state race coverage. Like I already mentioned, that the New York governor's race is a source of great, the Democratic primary is a source of great interest and focus of ours. In fact, some of our reporters have already done a story about Governor Cuomo's donations from the oil and gas industry coming around the issues of the plastic bag ban. But an example of a typical Sludge story can be seen from the Medium page of Donnie Shaw, our editor, which covers the big banks' contributions around the Senate tax bill, and how senators in support received something like 3 times as many campaign contributions. We're looking to surface those connections continually. But Marcos, in response to your question, so that's going to be the overwhelming majority of the stories that we're going to be producing, and members will, we hope, will be paying us to be able to continue the production of that journalism. And then there's the additional revenue stream of secondary but possible to be able to fulfill smart contracts for research or the kind of expert campaign contribution analysis that is our core competency.
And have you started with initial funding, or are you really going to be bootstrapping it based on subscriptions and tokens?
Our initial funding has come from Civil. And so Civil has put $1 million overall, not into over about a dozen newsrooms. And so that's a real sign of good faith commitment to supporting independent journalism. that of Civil's investment, they took $1 million and put it into newsrooms. And some of these are great journalists who come from the DNA Info network of local reporters. Some of them are industry experts covering the cannabis industry. And some of them, like the newsroom Popula from my colleague Maria Bustillos, will cover culture with some of the writers from the great website The All that was very popular in producing really original content within. Popula will be bringing an international focus. I could highlight more of the different newsrooms, but that's an example of that Civil is really doing the work of community building and doing a lot of outreach to the journalism community and digital news media, not just sort of dropping blockchain tech and saying, hey, why don't you pick this up? Instead, they're supporting independent businesses. They're supporting a decentralized model. And then in turn, on their blog, they've articulated how Civil, as a company going forward, as the ecosystem matures, will be able to monetize some of the media being produced on the platform through different initiatives. But the primary goal is, let's get to a place where journalists can get paid to do the kind of work that people need to read in our representative democracy, in our U.S. constitutional republic. And their focus then is, as we build towards public launch of the Civil platform, to focus on news, focus on independent, local, and policy journalism.
Excellent. I know I'm rooting for it.
Thanks. It's a thrilling experiment, and we're excited for more people to be able to join and publish on Civil. And it'll work a lot like other publishing systems. So you don't need to be a blockchain expert to be able to read about Civil or to be able to understand how you'll create your publication on Civil. Luckily they're doing their part to invest in making the tech more accessible, more user focused, of course. So you don't need to be an engineer to be able to get your local newsroom up on Civil, and do spread the word to writers, reporters, and media producers, whether that's video or audio or more, to be able to publish on Civil as an option for all of the sort of the blockchain-backed features that it enables.
Will this platform allow audio and video as well to be produced and archived?
Yes, so the initial focus is on text of news articles, but that can also sort of encompass, you can think about it as encompassing blog posts. And then, yes, the blog posts will be able to support publishing video and audio and other media in different ways, much the ways that any sort of blogging software would right now. You can think about it as being consistent with that. And then they're continuing to develop with new initiatives like Civil Studios that they announced yesterday. They're going to continue to develop new ways of supporting media in more, so to speak, focused or targeted, or I guess, showcase video and audio in more direct ways, and support things like documentary makers and independent media creators. And this podcast could be a great example to support that work in a more focused way. So yes, Civil will be able to support video and audio as it launches.
Excellent. And how can listeners learn more about Sludge and Civil?
Sure.
Where should we send them?
That's good. That's a great way. Great way to learn more, because a lot of this is documented publicly, which is really wild. It often isn't, but we're finding this great experience that it is. Folks can go to joincivil.com, and if they go to newsrooms, they can click on Sludge. Another way to find our splash page is readsludge.com, and there they can sign up for a free email newsletter. I'm actually going to be, our team will be sending our weekly newsletter out today with a roundup of money and politics links. It's totally free to receive, and it's chock full of the kind of information of stories we're tracking that we'll be using to sort of shape our editorial voice in the money and politics landscape as we launch soon.
I've been speaking with David Moore, co-founder of the newsroom Sludge, and this is Marcos Dinnerstein, host of A Better Mousetrap podcast. Thanks for listening. Subscribe to A Better Mousetrap newsletter for tech events, founder opportunities, feature stories by going to bettermousetrap.nyc. That's bettermousetrap.nyc.
You've been listening to a Better Mousetrap podcast, a joint production by Marcos Dinnerstein and Far From TV. For more interviews like this one, follow A Better Mousetrap podcast on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, and don't forget to sign up for the newsletter today.